Charleston Harbor in the early morning carried the dampness of the ocean, the salty wind threading through the narrow streets. In the faint light just breaking over the horizon, a middle-aged man leaned against a weathered wooden post in the parking area near the shopping district. He wore a faded hoodie, plain jeans, and slightly worn sneakers, nothing that would draw a second glance. Yet behind that modest disguise was Michael Grant, 52 years old, founder and CEO of the Harbor Fresh Market supermarket chain. 25 years earlier, he had started with a small store by the river, arranging crates of fruit with his own hands and writing prices on scraps of paper taped to an old glass pane. Back then, every transaction began with a smile and ended with a genuine thank you. But time and scale had pulled him away from the sales floor and into endless meeting rooms, where numbers and charts replaced the smell of fresh-baked bread or the jingle of the doorbell. Even though he still read reports and tracked revenue, he knew something was slipping away, something no spreadsheet could measure. Had his employees kept the warmth and dedication of those early days? The question had haunted him for months, and he realized there was only one way to answer it: to return to the sales floor, not as the head of the company, but as an unfamiliar face blending into the crowd. He chose the Harbor Fresh Market store in the waterfront shopping district, one of the top-performing locations, with steady sales and generally positive customer feedback. But Michael wanted to sense what the numbers could not tell, to see firsthand how employees interacted with each person who walked through the door, especially when there was no manager watching or oversight from the corporate office. Stepping through the automatic doors, he drew in the scent of freshly brewed coffee, mingling with the pine aroma of recently polished shelves. The sounds of barcode scanners, the rustle of wrapping paper, and the familiar greetings formed a rhythm unique to the store. At checkout counter 3, a young man with neatly kept brown hair was chatting with each customer in a warm tone and with attentive eyes. "Morning, Mr. Walter. Rough seas today?" A passing remark, but filled with familiarity and genuine connection. Michael lingered quietly in one corner, pretending to browse the cereal aisle, while in truth observing the young man, Ethan Ross, 27 years old, as he interacted. It was more than small talk. Ethan remembered names, shopping habits, even details like how a customer's dog was undergoing treatment for joint problems. Every smile, every friendly inquiry was so natural it was hard to believe it was for show. Michael had met employees who tried to appear enthusiastic when being observed, but Ethan was different. There was no stiffness or rush in the way he handed over groceries, took payment, and returned receipts. Every action seemed instinctive yet never mechanical. He realized he was staying longer than he had planned, drawn in by something he had feared was gone from his system: pure kindness. Yet part of him still wondered, was this just a fleeting moment, or was it truly who Ethan was? Michael decided he would remain for the entire morning, not just to observe, but to wait and see if any cracks appeared after hours of work. He believed that pressure, fatigue, and unexpected situations revealed a person's true nature, and he had no idea that in just a few hours, something would unfold before his eyes that would leave him speechless and set in motion a chain of events that would change not just one man and one store, but the very way an entire company understood its own values. That morning unfolded with the steady rhythm of a store gradually filling with customers. Michael kept himself busy moving between the aisles, rearranging crates of almond milk and stacking cereal boxes on the higher shelves, but his eyes frequently drifted toward checkout counter number 3. At 8:20, an elderly man appeared at the entrance, wearing a weathered windbreaker, walking a little slowly with slightly trembling hands. He carried only 2 items, a loaf of white bread and a small carton of milk. Michael paid little attention until he heard the barcode scanner fall silent. From behind the shelves, he listened. Ethan looked up with his familiar smile. "Good morning, Mr. Walter. Wind strong out there today, huh?" The old man replied with a slight nod, then dug into his jacket pocket, pulling out a few crumpled bills. His fingers paused, hesitating. "I think I'll have to put one back. I don't have enough." The words were spoken so softly, it was as if he didn't want anyone to hear. Michael found himself instinctively leaning out to see more clearly. Ethan didn't give him the chance to set anything aside. "It's okay, sir. This one's on me today." His voice was gentle as he scanned the remaining item. Walter shook his head in protest, but Ethan simply smiled and carefully packed the groceries. "I want to, sir. Please take it for me." The old man took the bag, murmured a quiet, "Thank you," and walked out with a lighter step. Michael stood motionless behind the aisle, the box of cookies still in his hand, not yet returned to the shelf. His mind swirled with questions. Was that allowed under store policy? Did Ethan do this often? Was this just a spontaneous impulse or a habit? Over the next hour, Michael deliberately worked closer to the register, stacking items while watching. The answer came quickly. A young woman, likely in her early 30s, entered carrying a small girl and a few baby items. When she swiped her card, the screen flashed "declined." She fumbled in her bag for cash. Ethan didn't let the moment drag on. He simply turned slightly, swiped his own card, and said, "You're all set. Hope she sleeps well tonight." The woman smiled her thanks, completely unaware of who had just paid for her. Less than 30 minutes later, a young man in a fast food uniform came in, counting coins to buy a sandwich. As he rang up the purchase, Ethan quietly slipped a $1 bill from his own pocket into the till before handing back the change. No explanation, no glance seeking admiration. 3 times in under 2 hours. Michael felt the initial question, "Do my employees still genuinely care?" had already been partly answered. Yet at the same time, a new question formed. Who was Ethan? Why would a young employee, at an age when most are focused solely on themselves, so readily spend his own money to help others, and do it as naturally as breathing? Michael knew he would have to dig deeper to understand, but he also knew the answer wouldn't come from a rushed conversation. He would have to be patient, observe longer, and find his way to the root of the story. That afternoon, as the shift neared its end, Michael decided to try a gentle approach. He followed the flow of employees into the small break room in the back, where the scent of brewed coffee and the hum of the air conditioner blended into a steady background noise. Ethan was sitting on a folding chair, removing his apron and folding it neatly with the ease of a deeply ingrained habit, then unscrewing the cap of a bottle of water. Michael walked over, still playing the role of Mark, the temporary employee from the office. "I saw you help a few people today," he began casually, as if making small talk. Ethan paused for a moment but didn't appear defensive. "Yeah, a few customers were having a hard time," he replied, his gaze steady. "If you can help, you help." The words were simple, without a trace of self-importance. Michael looked at him, wanting to ask more but held back. He realized this wasn't the kind of person who liked talking about himself. Instead, he let the moment pass, nodding with a faint smile. Inside, though, his mind circled the same thought. Who takes care of the one who always takes care of others? The next day, Michael arrived earlier than usual. He didn't go into the manager's office, nor did he seek out Patrick, the store manager. Instead, he grabbed a cart and began stocking shelves near the checkout counters. Ethan was already there, placing bottles of mineral water into the cooler while softly humming a tune. With no supervisor watching, no audience to impress, his smile and the way he greeted customers were exactly the same as the day before. Around 8:30, a young woman walked in, her hair hastily tied back, carrying a drowsy baby in her arms. In her hand were a few jars of baby food and a pack of diapers. When she swiped her card, the machine flashed, "declined." She frowned slightly, rummaging in her bag for some loose bills, then said, "I guess I'll have to put one back." Ethan didn't let her. He keyed something into the register, pulled out his wallet, and swiped his own card. "All set. Hope the little one sleeps soundly tonight." She smiled in thanks, never realizing the cashier had paid out of his own pocket. Michael, crouched nearby, stacking boxes of cookies, exhaled quietly. It was clear this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment gesture, but a habit. Moments later, an elderly man with an uneven gait walked in, purchasing nothing but a single cup of instant noodles. Ethan greeted him warmly. "How's your leg? Feeling better?" Then he poured him a hot cup of coffee. "Today's coffee is on the house, sir." It all happened as naturally as if he'd done it his whole life. Michael was still for a moment. None of this was in any training manual. This was something that couldn't be forced, it had to come from within. And it reminded him of himself many years ago when he had handed a loaf of bread to a mother shepherding 3 small children through a storm, thinking only that they needed a hot meal right then. He suddenly realized that the flame hadn't gone out in his system, it was still quietly burning at one checkout counter, in the hands of a 27-year-old man named Ethan Ross. That afternoon, as the flow of customers began to slow, Michael took the chance to learn more about this young man. He chose the lunch break, when the break room had only a few people left and the wall-mounted TV was turned down so low it was barely audible. Ethan was sitting in the corner, holding a burrito he had reheated in the microwave, eating while scrolling through his phone. Michael pulled up a chair across from him, pretending to make casual conversation to pass the time. "Do you ever think about why you do it?" Ethan looked up, slightly surprised. "Do what?" "Help people. Pay for them, swap shifts, stay late, no one's making you." Ethan set the burrito down, rubbing his hands on his jeans as if brushing away a hint of awkwardness. His voice lowered and slowed. "My dad died when I was 17. Heart attack, no warning. It was just me and my sister Sophie after that she was 11. No insurance, no savings, just a stack of bills." His eyes fixed on a point in the distance. "I dropped out of college, worked any job I could get, loading docks, gas stations, night shifts at stores. This is the most stable job I've ever had." Michael stayed quiet, letting the story unfold on its own. "Sophie's at the University of South Carolina now. Full scholarship, she's a lot smarter than me. I cover everything the scholarship doesn't. I live frugally, take the bus, no trips, nothing just so she can have a better chance." Michael nodded slightly but wanted to know more. "So, the people you help here, like Mr. Walter or the young woman today, why?" Ethan didn't blink. "Because I know what it feels like to be short $5 and still force a smile. I know the feeling of walking into a store with your heart pounding, afraid your card will get declined. And I remember exactly what it meant when someone once reached out a hand to help me." Michael felt something press against his chest, not just admiration, but the realization that he had let numbers overshadow memories. Years ago, he too had helped customers like that without a second thought. But over the years, reports and quotas had made him forget. Now, sitting across from him was a young man living that truth every day without anyone knowing. "Thank you for sharing," Michael said softly. "Not many people are willing to open up like that." Ethan just smiled faintly. "I'm not hiding it. It's just no one ever asks." Michael stood, resting his hand lightly on the table. "If you ever need something, don't hesitate to say so." Ethan tilted his head, half joking, half serious. "You're just a temp worker. What could you do?" Michael chuckled. "More than you think." Then he walked out, leaving behind Ethan's faint, offhand smile, and in his own heart, a decision already beginning to take shape. The next morning, Michael arrived earlier than anyone else. The fluorescent lights in the store still glowed faintly, and the air carried a mix of floor cleaner and the scent of freshly opened cardboard boxes. He didn't stop by the manager's office or head to the registers, but walked straight to the stockroom in the back. There, beside a pallet of bottled water still wrapped in plastic, stood Patrick Lewis, a calm, silver-bearded man of 60, carefully slicing through packing tape with a box cutter. Michael approached, still keeping up the guise of Mark, the temporary employee. They worked side by side for a while, the sound of the blade cutting cardboard mingling with the clink of bottles. When Michael sensed Patrick had grown used to his presence, he tossed out a question that seemed casual enough. "How long have you been here?" Patrick gave a small smile. "Almost 10 years, back when prices were still handwritten on paper signs." Michael nodded slightly, feeling a trace of familiarity in the answer. He followed up. "What do you think of Ethan?" Patrick paused for a moment, then looked up. "That kid is one of the best we've got here," he said firmly, without hesitation. Then Patrick leaned against the stack of boxes, his expression turning more serious. "Not just good at the job. He's been through things that would have made other people quit a long time ago. Lost his dad when he was still in his teens, and his mom left not long after. It's just been him and his sister. He's put her through school, and now she's in college. Michael stayed quiet, letting him continue. At one point, he was working 3 jobs at once. Never once skipped a shift here. I told him to take a break, but he just smiled and said, "1 more semester and Sophie will be set." Patrick's voice dropped lower. 2 months ago, he passed out right here in this stockroom, got back up, drank some water, and went right back to loading boxes like nothing happened. Nobody but me knows. Michael felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. Stories like this never make it into reports. On paper, Ethan was just another name on the shift roster, with a few brief notes like reliable or rarely calls out. But behind that was a person carrying far more than his share. Michael's eyes drifted to the time card board hanging in the corner. Ethan's name filled nearly every day with no gaps, sometimes for 10 days straight. Without thinking, Michael snapped a photo with his phone, not knowing exactly why, only that he wanted to keep proof. Patrick glanced at him, as if reading his thoughts. "You're not just a temp, are you?" Michael gave a faint smile. "I'm just asking a few questions." Patrick didn't press, only nodded with a knowing smile that said more than words. In the quiet of the stockroom, Michael realized the answer he was looking for wasn't only in how Ethan treated customers, but in how he existed among his coworkers quietly, steadfastly, and never allowing anyone else to carry the weight he bore himself. That afternoon, Michael stood tucked behind the beverage display, watching Ethan from a distance. It was still the same calm voice, the familiar greetings, the unchanging smile. If he hadn't heard Patrick's story that morning, he might have been like any other customer, seeing only a young, quick cashier. But now, in every bow of the head, every polite gesture, Michael could see the image of a young man quietly shouldering the weight of life without ever letting anyone glimpse the fatigue beneath. The store slowly emptied as the clock passed 9 in the evening. The door chime rang one last time and then fell silent. Staff began cleaning counters and mopping floors. Patrick stood at the end of an aisle checking the inventory list. Ethan was wiping down his register, his hands moving steadily as they did every day. Michael knew this was the moment. He stepped out into the center of the store, removed his baseball cap, and unzipped his hoodie. The small chatter around him stopped. Patrick looked up, his eyes flashing with recognition. Another employee dropped the pen in their hand. Michael took a breath, his voice clear and firm. "I'm Michael Grant, founder and CEO of Harbor Fresh Market." A wave of silence rippled through the room as every head turned toward him. Ethan froze, his eyes wide with surprise. Michael continued, "For the past 3 days, I've been working here as a new employee. I wanted to see how this store truly runs, not through reports, but with my own eyes and ears." He walked slowly toward Register 3, where Ethan stood. "Ethan," his voice softened but still carried through the stillness, "what I've seen from you has changed me." Ethan looked slightly unsettled, not yet knowing how to respond. Michael glanced around the room, then fixed his gaze back on him. "You didn't know who I was. You didn't have to prove anything to anyone. But I saw you pay out of your own pocket for customers, treat everyone with kindness that no rulebook requires. I also know about your father, your sister, and the endless hours you've worked without rest, even when your health told you otherwise." Patrick stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, I have to say, what he's done, while admirable, doesn't exactly follow policy." Michael cut in, his tone low but decisive. "Policy isn't everything. I need the truth." Then he turned back to Ethan. "You've lifted others up without anyone asking you to, and that is exactly why I want you to know, effective immediately, you are no longer just a cashier. You are now the assistant store manager." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room, and a few people couldn't help but smile in quiet joy for their colleague. Michael went on, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. "And Harbor Fresh Market will cover all remaining education expenses for Sophie, any costs her scholarship doesn't include." Ethan lowered his head, his eyes reddening but refusing to let the tears fall. He said quietly, I don't know what to say. Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to say anything. Just keep doing what you've been doing. Chat. The next morning, word about the previous evening had spread throughout the store and even reached other branches. Ethan walked in as he always did, hoodie pulled loosely over his head, stride unhurried, but the way people looked at him had changed. It wasn't curiosity, nor pity, but a quiet respect. A few coworkers nodded in greeting, some offered small smiles, and while no one said much, everyone understood the significance of what had happened. Michael was already in the small back office, no longer in the hoodie or cap that had once concealed him. When Ethan stepped in, Michael stood and gestured for him to sit. You won't need to stay long, Michael began. There's just something I want to make official. From the desk drawer, he took out a new nameplate, the metallic sheen catching the light. Ethan Ross, Assistant Store Manager. Ethan accepted it with both hands, turning it over as if still unsure it was real. I'm not sure I deserve this, he said softly. Michael shook his head slightly. It's precisely because you never asked for it that you've proven you do. He continued, this position comes with a raise, full benefits, paid leave, but that's not the real reward. Ethan looked up, his eyes questioning. Harbor Fresh is launching a new fund, the Quiet Hero Fund. It will start here in this store, then expand across the entire chain. The fund will support employees who go beyond the demands of their job, not in sales figures or speed, but in kindness and decency. Ethan said nothing, but his eyes widened, the emotion in them clear. And Sophie, Michael went on, I spoke with your sister's school this morning. All remaining tuition and books will be covered by us. Ethan tried to speak words of thanks, but only a faint breath escaped, caught in his throat. At that moment, Patrick appeared in the doorway, his voice measured. I'd like to say something. He recounted how last year, when his wife began dialysis, he had been overwhelmed trying to adjust his schedule. Ethan had quietly swapped shifts with him every week, without complaint, without telling anyone. Then, one by one, other coworkers stepped in to share their own stories. How Ethan had given them gas money so they could get to work, donated his old tablet so their child could study online, or simply picked up part of their workload when they were struggling. Ethan stood in the middle of the room, listening to it all, only shaking his head slightly. I don't think I've done anything special. Michael looked directly at him, replying slowly, It's because you think that makes it special. That day passed like any other, the steady flow of customers, shelves still needing restocking, orders still to be processed, but the atmosphere in the store had shifted. People talked to each other more, asking small questions that might once have seemed unimportant. The smiles they exchanged were no longer just polite gestures, but carried a genuine warmth. Michael walked the aisles, taking it all in, and he realized what he had hoped for was already beginning to happen. The kindness of one person was quietly spreading, becoming a new habit for the entire team. Before leaving the store that afternoon, Michael passed by checkout lane number 3. Ethan was bent over, helping an elderly woman search for a lost booklet of coupons in her handbag. He wasn't rushed nor distracted, patiently flipping through each slip, checking every coupon. When the woman smiled and thanked him, Ethan simply replied, I'm happy to help. Michael lingered for a few seconds, then continued toward the door, this time without drawing Ethan's attention, knowing this story was never meant to be about him. 2 weeks later, the store still looked the same from the outside, the familiar green sign, the entrance bustling with customers, but inside everything had changed. During the morning shift, Ethan stood behind the counter, his new nameplate gleaming against his uniform shirt. Customers greeted him as they always had, but now their eyes held something different. They knew the man behind that smile. A few shook his hand. One woman gently placed a small note on the counter, with only the words, You helped my father when he couldn't speak up. We will not forget. Ethan folded the note carefully and tucked it into his wallet. In the back office, Patrick sat at his desk, recalling the moment Michael had told him, "I don't need a rule book, I need the truth." Since that day, he had changed the way he managed, asking his employees more about their families, health, and lives, not just about sales figures. Across the city, Sophie opened her tuition portal and saw the balance at 0. She texted her brother, "It's paid, are you serious?" Ethan simply replied with a thumbs-up emoji. She didn't know the full story, but she could feel that her brother had done something extraordinary. Michael returned to the company headquarters, walked into the conference room, and opened his laptop. He told the executive team, "From now on, every meeting starts with a story, not a spreadsheet." And that's exactly what happened. Regional managers began sending in kindness stories about an employee in a small town helping a customer stranded in a storm, or a stock clerk volunteering to deliver groceries to an elderly person who couldn't leave home. Michael even created an internal newsletter called The Quiet Report, ending each issue with the quote, "Sometimes the person who changes a company doesn't sit in the corner office but stands behind the counter, doing the right thing when no one is watching." One Saturday afternoon, just inside the entrance of Harbor Fresh Market, a new sign appeared. White background, simple black letters, no frame, no elaborate decoration. "Be the reason someone believes in people again. Honoring Ethan Ross." There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no announcement over the speakers. The sign simply stood there quietly, for anyone walking in to read. Some glanced at it and smiled faintly. Others paused for a few seconds before pushing their carts forward. Ethan had never asked to be recognized, but when that recognition came, it took on a different form, not a round of applause or loud praise, but in the actions carried forward by others. A new employee volunteered to cover a shift for a sick coworker. Another cashier paid for the groceries of an elderly customer who had forgotten their wallet. A few stockroom workers proposed forming a volunteer group to deliver goods to seniors in the neighborhood. From Ethan's perspective, the lesson was simple. You don't need to be wealthy to be generous. You only need enough awareness to recognize when someone is struggling, and you can reach out a hand. For Patrick, he came to understand that people work more wholeheartedly when they feel they're being treated as human beings, and they stay longer when they are valued for who they are. For Michael, he realized that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, but about being the one willing to listen when no one else cares to. One morning, as Ethan was checking stock at the bread counter, a middle-aged customer stopped, shook his hand, and simply said, "Thank you." No explanation was needed, both knew why. And at the far end of the aisle, Michael stood still for a few seconds, watching the scene. He knew then that the greatest legacy he could leave for this company wasn't in the number of stores or the profit margins, but in fostering an environment where even the smallest acts could leave a lasting echo. That morning, sunlight slanted through the large front windows of the store, casting a warm golden hue over the fruit displays. Ethan stood at the counter, the assistant store manager nameplate gleaming on his chest. Customers came in as they did every day, some picking up a coffee to go, others grabbing a few loaves of fresh bread. But now, when their eyes met his, there was always a sense of recognition. Some offered a simple smile, a few reached out for a gentle handshake, and others quietly left a folded thank you note on the counter. Ethan accepted them all in the same way, carefully keeping them, without showing them off or saying more. In the back office, Patrick sat in quiet thought at his desk. Since Ethan's story became known, he had changed his management habits. He no longer asked only, "How are this week's sales?" but added, "How's your mother? Do you need an extra day off? Are you doing okay?" He had realized that sometimes a single well-timed question is enough to keep a good employee and make them feel like they truly belong here. A few blocks away, Sophie sat in the library at the University of South Carolina, opened her tuition account portal, and saw the words, "Balance, 0." She texted her brother, "Tuition's all paid, are you sure about this?" Ethan replied only with a thumbs-up emoji. She didn't know the full details of the story, but she understood well enough that her brother had sacrificed a great deal to make it happen, and she promised herself that one day she would pass that same kindness on to someone else. As for Michael, back at company headquarters, he began his leadership meeting with the words, From now on, every meeting starts with a story, not a spreadsheet. Stories began pouring in from across the branches about an employee in a rural town helping a customer stranded in a storm, about a stock clerk volunteering to deliver groceries to someone who couldn't leave their home. Michael compiled them into an internal newsletter called The Quiet Report, ending each issue with the quote, "Sometimes the person who changes a company isn't the one sitting in the corner office, but the one standing behind the counter, doing the right thing when no one is watching." From the perspective of someone who has walked alongside many businesses, I believe the lasting strength of an organization does not lie in reports or growth targets, but in how it nurtures human values in everyday life. A business model can be replicated through processes, but only kindness can create a culture, the very thing that gives every number its meaning. Ethan proved this through quiet yet steadfast actions, and Michael proved that a true leader who knows how to listen will never overlook such stories. If you too believe that kindness is strength, leave a comment with the 3 words, "Keep kindness," so we can continue to spread this value together. And don't forget to hit like if this story touched you, and subscribe to continue joining us on the journey to seek out and honor ordinary people who do extraordinary things.